Okay, people. All right. Chapter 16 of this beautiful book that we're reading. It's a hard book to read, but it's worth it. Okay. Chapter 16, The Greening of America, Monarch. One of the problems of researching covert control is obvious. We are attempting to delve into programs that are secret and meant to remain so. For this reason, there is often no paper trail to follow, and the researcher must pick his way through thickets of conflicting information and first-person accounts that sometimes lack substantiation and challenge our current belief systems. It is often a difficult task to sort out fact from fiction, reality from delusion, or disinformation. After CIA mind control programs were severed as official projects in the 1960s and 1970s, the paper trail becomes sporadic. The Freedom of Information Act, which has provided at least a partial view of what took place during the MKUltra era, now fails us entirely. One is forced to access primarily first-person accounts, some of them contradictory, some of them plainly delusory. Determining the truth becomes difficult, and it is evident that there are many areas of our knowledge of mind control programs that will take years to understand, to clarify. An area of research that still demands corroboration and definition is what has come to be known as Project Monarch. On June 25, 1992, psychologist Dr. Corydon Hammond gave a talk to an audience of psychology professionals at the 4th Annual Eastern Regional Conference on Abuse and Multiple Personality in Alexandria, Virginia. The title of the lecture was Hypnosis in MPD, Ritual Abuse, Multiple Personality Disorder. And it was one of our first public presentations in which seems to expose a vast terra incognita in the area of mind control research. Dr. Hammond began his presentation by commenting on the prevalence of multiple personality disorder cases who had apparently suffered ritual abuse at the hand of mind controllers, and his own efforts to understand what was going on by interviewing other psychologists and psychiatrists who were encouraging the same type of cases around the country, who were encountering the same type of cases around the country. Carefully, without leading or contaminating, as Hammond says, he cross-checked with other mental health care professionals, comparing cases until he felt that he had had a good sense of what was going on. Hammond stated that in as many as 2/3 of the ritual abuse cases that existed, the victims had been subjected to a highly developed and uniform technology of mind control, suggesting that there is a large network of practitioners of this kind of practicing. There's a large network of practitioners of this kind practicing. This observation goes along with my own belief that the CIA, beginning in the 1940s, labored long in creating a secret science of mind control, the details of which are only now coming to light. What we know of MKUltra is the tip of the iceberg. Often, according to Hammond, these will be bloodline people. That is, persons programmed by their parents who are involved in cultic practice such as Satanism or in intelligence agency programs. Hammond said, when you start to find the same highly esoteric information in different states and different countries, from Florida to California, you start to get an idea that there's something going on that is very large, very well coordinated, with a great deal of communication and systematicness to what's happening. So I have gone from someone kind of neutral and not knowing what to think about it all to someone who clearly believes ritual abuse is real, and that the people who say it isn't are either naive, like people who didn't want to believe the Holocaust, or they're dirty. According to Hammond, what they basically do is they will get a child, and they will start this in basic forms, it appears, by about 2.5 after the child's already been made dissociative. They'll make him dissociative not only through abuse, like sexual abuse, but also things like putting a mouse trap on their fingers and teaching the parents, you do not go in until the child stops crying. Only then do you go in and remove it. They start in rudimentary forms at about 2.5 and kick it into high gear, it appears, around 6 or 6.5. Continue through adolescence with periodic reinforcements into adulthood. Basically, in the programming, the child will be put typically on a gurney. They will have an IV in one hand or arm. They will be strapped down, typically naked. There will be wires attached to their head to monitor electroencephalograph patterns, EEGs. They will see a pulsing light, most often described as red, occasionally white or blue. Think about that. Red and blue, flashing lights, pulsing lights, right? What else does that? They'll be given, most commonly, I believe, Demerol. Then they will describe a pain on one ear, their right ear generally, where it appears a needle has been placed, and they will hear weird, disorienting sounds in that ear while they see photic stimulation to drive the brain into a brainwave pattern with a pulsing light at a certain frequency. Then, after a suitable period, when they're in certain brainwave state, they will begin programming oriented to self-destruction and debasement of the person. Hammond says that many of the cases dramatizing MPD phenomena have connections to the CIA and military installations. He describes one patient who went to a cult school where mind control sessions would take place several times a week. She would go into a room, get all hooked up. When she was in a proper altered state, now they were no longer having to monitor it with electroencephalographs. They also had already placed on her electrodes, one in the vagina, for example, 4 on the head. Sometimes they'll be on other parts of the body. They will then begin, and they would say to her, "You're angry with someone in the group." She'd say, "No, I'm not," and they would violently shock her. They would say the same thing until she complied and didn't make any negative response. They would continue, and because you are angry with someone in the group, or when you are angry with someone in the group, you will hurt yourself. Do you understand? She said no, and they shocked her. They repeated again, "Do you understand?" "Well, yes, but I don't want to." Shock her again until they got compliance. Then they keep adding to it. "And you will hurt yourself by cutting yourself. Do you understand?" Maybe she'd say yes, but they might say, "We don't believe you," and shock her anyway. Go back and go over it again. They would continue in this sort of fashion. She said typically it seemed as though they'd go about 30 minutes, take a break for a smoke or something, come back. They may review what they'd done and stopped, or they might review what they'd done and go on to new material. She said the sessions might go half an hour, they might go 3 hours. She estimated 3 times a week. Programming under the influence of drugs in a certain brainwave state, and with these noises in one ear and them speaking in the other ear, usually the left ear, associated with the right hemisphere, non-dominant brain functioning, and with them talking, therefore, and requiring intense concentration, intense focusing. Let me read that again. Programming under the influence of drugs in a certain brainwave state, and with these noises in one ear and them speaking in the other ear, usually the left ear, associated with right hemisphere non-dominant brain functioning, and with them talking, therefore, and requiring intense concentration, intense focusing. Because often they'll have to memorize and say certain things back, word perfect, to avoid punishment, shock, and other kinds of things that are occurring, there will be very standardized types of hypnotic things done at times. There'll be sensory deprivation, which we know increases suggestibility in anyone. Total sensory deprivation suggestibility has significantly increased from the research. Hammond has come to believe that there are several levels of programming within the patients with whom he has worked that can be accessed by letters of the Greek alphabet. Although Hammond does not mention it, these designations may have been roughly derived from the classifications in the classic eugenics tract, Brave New World, by Aldous Huxley. Some of these letter designations follow. The first level, alpha, is generalized mind control, the base level of programming of the subject and characterized by augmented memory and the splitting of the mind into left and right brain divisions. Beta. Beta is apparently programming of sexuality and the destruction of moral inhibitions. Gamma. Gamma is a level providing mind control system protection involving deception and misdirection. Delta. Delta is the assassin programming level and includes killers trained to perform ritual sacrifice. Theta. Theta is termed the psychic killer level. According to Hammond, you know, I had never in my life heard those two terms paired together. I'd never heard the words psychic killers put together, but when you have people in different states, including therapists inquiring and asking, what is theta, and patients say to them, psychic killers, it tends to make one a believer that certain things are very systematic and very widespread. This comes from their belief in psychic sorts of abilities and powers, including their ability to psychically communicate with mother, and including their ability to psychically cause somebody to develop a brain aneurysm and die. Omega is the level of programming dictating self-destruction and is intended to cause the subject to commit suicide when they are interrogated or begin therapy. Hammond believes that this type of program was originally created by the CIA, and in particular Dr. L. Wilson Green, Dr. Green, whose original name, Hammond reports, was Greenbaum. Among the code names used for the programming is Green Tree and Ultra Green. Hammond describes a self-destruction program. This was called the Green Bomb, B-O-M-B. Lots of interesting internal consistencies like that play on words with Dr. Greenbaum, his original name. Now, in this case, it was done to her at age 9 for the first time, only hers was different. Hers was a suggestion for amnesia. If you ever remember anything about Ultra Green and the Green Tree, you will go crazy. You will become a vegetable and be locked up forever. Then finally the suggestions added, and it will be easier to just kill yourself than have that happen to you if you ever remember it. At age 12 then, 3 years later, they used what sounds like a sodium amytal interview to try to breach the amnesia and find out if they could. They couldn't. So then they strapped her down again, gave her something to kind of paralyze her body, gave her LSD, and reinforced all the suggestions. did a similar thing at the age of 16. One area where mind control programming takes place, according to Hammond, is in southern Utah. Remember the Process Church? Hammond asked in his presentation. Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, was killed by the Manson family, who were associated with the Process Church. A lot of prominent people in Hollywood were associated, and then they went underground, the books say, in about 78, and vanished. Well, they're alive and well in southern Utah. We have a thick file in the Utah Department of Public Safety documenting that they moved to southern Utah north of Monument Valley, bought a movie ranch in the desert, renovated it, expanded it, built a bunch of buildings there, carefully monitored so that very few people go out of there and no one can get in, and changed their name. A key word in their name is foundation. The foundation. Hammond's allegations about ritual abuse in Utah are supported by a document I received in 1991. This was a copy of a memo authored by a general authority of the Mormon Church, second counselor in the presiding bishopric, Glenn L. Pace, directed to the Strengthening Church Members Committee. Suffices to say that I am not a Mormon. I am not a member of any organized religious group, but that members of the church sent it to me. According to the memo, which has "do not reproduce" emblazoned across its masthead, Mr. Pace has met with 60 victims of ritual abuse in Utah. Pace writes, that number could be twice or three times as many. If I did not discipline myself to only one meeting per week. Of the 60 victims with whom I have met, 53 are female and 7 are male. 8 are children. The abuse occurred in the following places: 37 in Utah, 3 in Idaho, 4 in California, 2 in Mexico, and 14 in other places. 53 victims are currently living in the state of Utah. All 60 individuals are members of the Mormon Church. 45 victims are alleged witnessing and or participating in human sacrifice. The majority were abused by relatives, often their parents. All have developed psychological problems, and most have been diagnosed as having multiple personality disorder or some other form of dissociative disorder. Pace reports, I don't pretend to know how prevalent the problem is. All I know is that I have met with 60 victims. Assuming that each one comes from a coven of 13, we are talking about the involvement of 800 or so right here on the Wasatch Front in Utah. Obviously, I have only, and this is in 1991, this is 30 years ago. Obviously, I have only seen those coming forth to get help. They are in their 20s and 30s for the most part. I can only assume that it is expanding geometrically, and am horrified the numbers represented by the generation who are now children and teenagers. Pace goes on to detail the mindset of these cult victims, with information more reminiscent of the type of intelligence agency mind manipulation that Hammond speaks of than straight Satanism. The memories seem to come in The memories seem to come in layers. For example, the first memory might be of incest. Then they remember robes and candles. Next, they realize that their father or mother or both were present when they were being abused. Another layer will be the memory of seeing other people hurt or even killed. Then they remember having seen babies killed. Another layer is realizing that they participated in the sacrifices. One of the most painful memories may be that they even sacrificed their own baby. With each layer of memory comes another set of problems with which they must deal. Is the PACE memo an accurate representation of what is going on? Is Hammond correct in his view about a vast mind control underground? The main problem with Hammond's testimony is the difficulty in substantiating his statements. We do know, however, that the reports of many persons who believe that they have been victims of mind control coincide with the information that Hammond has brought forward. Dr. Green. That motherfucker. I don't know whether to love him or hate him. My understanding, and that could change, but my understanding as of right now is that he gave me the protocol to get out. I have a memory of him whispering in my left ear that I was his favorite, that I was his, what's the word? What's the word he used? Oh my God, my brain. See, I start blanking out when I start reading about stuff like that because I just get so overwhelmed with the type of information that it is and the nature of it, that it's really hard for me to stay in my body. And I stay in my body, but it's, my brain sort of fizzles out a little bit because this is an area that is specifically tender for me. I've been able to dismantle all the different personalities that once existed within me. I'm really lucky. Most of the people that are like me don't make it. And more people are discovering that they have dissociative identity disorder, DID. I remember those programs in me. I remember the words of those programs in me that told me to kill myself, that told me to cut myself, that told me to starve myself, that told me to commit suicide. A lot of programs, a lot. And it's taken me years of my life to be able to dismantle those programs in me. And it took me years of my life to remember them, to remember being programmed and being able to understand what had happened, you know, and how to counteract the programs themselves that were sort of running me before. By the time I was 30 years old, I had been able to dismantle 15 of those altars. And this is before I even understood, like, you know, what was really going on with me at all. And right after that is when my father tried to, or successfully put me on medication, on an antipsychotic drug, which I then, you know, got myself out of 2 months later. But it and I spoke about that in a previous video. Yeah. It's a lot, dude. And I'm super grateful that I'm alive. And I'm super grateful to be here in this body and to be fully present for my experience. And it's hard for me to go back into those memories simply because of the nature of them. And I have forced myself to do so on several occasions, just so I can get the clarity that I need and integrate them and take my power back from them, because I refuse to have my power being siphoned off in any way, shape, or form. I've canceled all the contracts with the Dark Lords in my DNA. I've removed them from my DNA and my family's DNA. I've gone out of my way to clear this from my frequency, right? And to develop a system of healing that can support others with this specifically. So, having said that, I'm just really grateful to be here and to be in one place, right? To have my consciousness in one place and to have a quiet mind. And to be able to have my own original thought forms and to speak my truth and to be alive, simply to be alive. I had to rebuild my body. My central nervous system was completely fucked, and I did that about 6 years ago now, and I've been different ever since then. And I did what's called a core health rebuild program, which, through cell salts and homeopathics, I'm able to back viruses out of my body and rebuild my foundational reserves back up so that, I have energy and that my adrenals aren't completely crashed, because my adrenals basically crashed and 4 of my organs were also failing, and all this crazy shit was happening to me all the time. And it was nuts, dude. Crazy. And fortunately for me, I had someone in my life that was able to help me with this. And yeah. And her and I work closely together because there's a deep level of trust there. And that's rare for me to have that deep level of trust of others. And, I can only trust myself usually. So there's that too. So it's really nice when you can trust another human being, especially when you've been a targeted individual and you've been somebody that's been a part of these programs and have been victimized by numerous characters. It's hard to trust normal human beings. And it's hard to trust yourself and what you're getting, It's hard to trust your gut instincts and your intuition. And it takes a while to deepen into that knowing for yourself of what's real and what is resonant and what feels as truth. And so I've spent my life doing that. I've spent my life searching to find those pieces of truth that I can hold on to, that I can, and the quality and the essence of truth, and what does that feel like? So that I know when I see something or witness something, I know what's true and what's false, right? That's very clear for me. It's very distinct. So, thank you for witnessing that and being present with me. I'm not in the mood to cry, but this is very sensitive information, and it's hard to breathe through it. I have a hard time sharing it. So I appreciate your witnessing, and I appreciate that you're here with me. And it's also very nerve-wracking because it's really hard to just do it in the first place. So thank you for loving me and showing up and being here with me and being fully present. I appreciate that so much. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful evening. One thing I will say, actually, that I didn't say that I was going to say about the Monarch program is I was actually in more than just the Monarch program. Obviously, I was in several different programs, but one of the things about the Monarch program is that they use that, the beta sex kitten programming and the Monarch programming in Hollywood in the music industry and in the acting industry, but specifically in the for performers in the music industry. They program them from the very beginning of their life, right? And if they get involved as child actors or as children in Hollywood, they're being exposed immediately to pedophilia, and they're being taken advantage of, and they're being controlled. And yeah. So the obvious place that I went after my hometown was Hollywood. And I was, going to be a big superstar, right? And I was chosen for that, and I was groomed that way. I was groomed to be a world leader. So I was groomed in any way they could figure out how to utilize me, and so I was exposed to a lot of really, really evil people and a lot of really dark magic. And that part is really hard for me because it's so vile and it's so upsetting and disturbing what I personally went through, let alone what everybody else has gone through and what I witnessed as well. So I did a video earlier about having never been political and why. And in there I talk about what's really going on in the world and why this is so important that we move through this transition thoroughly, so that we don't ever have to revisit this level of darkness ever again. And that is important. And that there are very few certain people fighting for us right now in that regard. And so I just pray for them every night. I pray for the soldiers. I pray for all the good people in the government that are doing what they can to do the right thing, to make sure that this doesn't continue, and that we end human suffering, and that we implement something that works for all parties, for all beings. So I pray for the highest good, the highest outcome for all humans, for all beings on this planet, for all beings everywhere in this universe, in this cosmos. That is my prayer. It's a simple one, but it's, every night every time I go into meditation, or any of those times where I'm sitting still and I'm listening, I'm looking and I'm listening, and I see a lot. And I do my best to bring energy where it needs to go, to support good, to support love, to support the divine plan. So with that, I'm going to go. Thank you so much for listening.